I had no idea that a single moment would alter the course of my life forever. It was just a regular Saturday afternoon in Asheville, North Carolina, the sun setting late as the breeze rustled through the maple trees of our quiet neighborhood. I can still recall the rich aroma of the black coffee in my hand, the warmth of the cup as I leaned against the kitchen counter, gazing out the window. The house at 243 Maplewood Drive felt quieter than usual, as my husband, Ben, was working the night shift at the hospital. Since his promotion to the emergency department, nights without him had become routine. I swirled my coffee, taking slow sips. From upstairs, I heard a faint sound, barely audible. At first, I dismissed it, assuming it was Ben's stepson, Nathan, tinkering with an electronic device in his room. Nathan, at 25, was independent and working on his master's degree at the University of North Carolina. Initially, I had planned to head back to the living room, but something, perhaps an instinct, stopped me. I set my coffee down and made my way upstairs, each step creaking under my weight. The door to Nathan's room was ajar, the soft blue glow of his computer screen casting light on his face. I was about to knock when my gaze froze involuntarily. Nathan was sitting on the bed, his hands moving rapidly. The screen's light reflected clearly in his eyes. At first, I assumed he was watching something, but when I shifted my position slightly, my perception changed completely. A chill ran down my spine, and my heart skipped a beat. I had seen enough. Nathan noticed too, nearly jumping from the bed and frantically pressing the button to turn off the screen. But it was too late. The moment our eyes met, I saw the panic in his, shame, confusion, and something else I could not identify. The room seemed to freeze for an endless second. Nathan stammered, "I'm sorry," his voice small, almost pleading. A strange heat spread through me, and I wanted to speak to break the silence, but the words caught in my throat. I turned and walked out of the room before I could process what had just happened. My heart raced as I descended the stairs, echoing in my ears. "What did I just see?" I whispered to myself, gripping the railing as though it were the only thing holding me from an invisible abyss. I knew I should have knocked, should have ignored that small sound, should have let it pass, but I hadn't, and now things could never go back to how they were. I sat on the couch, my hands still clutching my now cold coffee, trying to push the moment from my mind. But Nathan's confused eyes kept resurfacing. For 4 years since I married Ben, Nathan and I had shared a polite but distant relationship. He was quiet, reserved, and intelligent. I had always thought he saw me as nothing more than a stepmother. But tonight, something had shifted. I felt it when Nathan came downstairs a short time later. He didn't say anything, but the tension between us was palpable. He avoided my gaze as he passed, but I knew he was acutely aware of my presence. I should have said something to ease the tension, a gentle joke, a reassuring word. Instead, I stayed silent, staring at the TV without truly seeing anything. For the next 3 days, things seemed to return to normal. Nathan continued his morning coffee routine, buried himself in his laptop, and went to school as usual. But I knew something invisible had shifted between us. I started noticing subtle changes. While doing the dishes, I could feel his eyes flicking toward me before quickly looking away. When I entered the living room, Nathan would stiffen briefly before resuming his work. Once, when I bent down to reach for something in the cupboard, he hesitated, walking past me a little closer than usual. I convinced myself I was imagining it, but one evening as we sat together watching TV, something became clearer. Normally, we kept our distance, but tonight it felt smaller. I noticed the warmth of his body as he shifted in his chair, and then, as I shifted, my hand brushed against his for just a split second. But it was enough to make the tension between us palpable. We froze. Nathan's gaze was different now, no longer innocent, but hesitant, as though he was struggling with something inside. I turned away, pretending nothing had happened, but deep down, I knew things had changed, and from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. I told myself that if I ignored it, things would go back to normal. It was all just fleeting moments, misunderstandings that I had imagined. But one night, I realized I was wrong, terribly wrong. At 2:17 a.m., I lay in bed, an uneasy feeling settling over me for no reason I could explain. I tossed and turned, trying to sleep, but my thoughts kept drifting toward Nathan. I shouldn't be thinking about him, not remembering the way he looked at me the night before. But the more I tried to forget, the stronger the pull inside me grew. I needed air, so I got out of bed and walked toward the hallway, intending to get a glass of water from the kitchen. But as I passed Nathan's room, I noticed the door was slightly ajar, a soft light spilling from his desk lamp, casting faint shadows on the wall. I told myself to keep walking, to return to my reality, but my gaze caught the scene inside, and my heart stopped. Nathan was sleeping, lying on his side, the covers pulled low, revealing his broad shoulders. The light from the lamp bathed his skin, creating an image that felt both serene and dangerous. I knew I should look away, but I couldn't. Then Nathan stirred. He turned, and for a terrifying moment, our eyes met. I froze. Neither of us spoke, neither moved. We just stared at each other, as though time itself had stopped. Nathan blinked, then tilted his head slightly. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low and sleepy. I couldn't speak. I could lie, say I was just passing by, but Nathan had already seen me. He knew there was no reason for me to be standing there. I had crossed a line. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. Nathan studied me for a moment before taking a deep breath and sitting up. The blanket slid down, and I quickly turned away, trying to hide my embarrassment. But it was too late. Nathan chuckled softly, a knowing laugh. "You don't have to rush off," he said. My heart raced. I knew I should leave, end this before it went any further, but I stayed frozen. Nathan sat up, his eyes locked on mine, filled with a strange confidence. He knew I had been watching. He knew that I couldn't deny what had just happened. "Hey," he said slowly, his voice low, testing me. "Aren't you sleepy?" I swallowed, my heart racing. Just going to the kitchen to get some water, I murmured, my voice betraying my unease. Nathan tilted his head, studying me intently. He knew I was lying. Really? He smiled, a dangerous little smile. I didn't know why I did it, but I turned to leave. I had to stop this before it spiraled further. But just as I reached the doorknob, Nathan's voice stopped me. Have you thought about it? I froze. I didn't need to ask what he meant. I knew, and so did he. My breath hitched, and I gripped the doorknob, but I didn't turn it. I should have left, but instead, I stood there, torn. Nathan took a step toward me, his eyes burning with a challenge I couldn't ignore. Have you thought about it? He asked again, his voice low. I couldn't lie. The words caught in my throat. Nathan stepped closer, his presence overwhelming. I knew I should push him away, but I didn't. I couldn't. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear. You could say no, but you won't. I shivered, not from the cold, but from something deeper. I knew I should walk away, but instead I stood there, caught in the pull of his gaze. Then Nathan's fingers brushed my wrist, and just like that, any remaining barriers between us crumbled. I didn't remember how I left Nathan's room. One moment, I was frozen, caught between reason and instinct. The next, I was in my room, my back pressed against the door, my heart pounding. What had just happened? I lay awake all night, unable to shake the thoughts I knew I shouldn't be having. Part of me didn't want to forget, didn't want to let go of that moment. The next day, I avoided Nathan, keeping myself busy with chores, trying to push him out of my mind. But by evening, I couldn't avoid him any longer. Nathan came home late from the library. When he entered the kitchen, I was washing dishes. But I could feel his presence even without looking. I thought he would act as if nothing had happened. I hoped he would. But when I turned around, his gaze was steady. You're avoiding me, he said. I gripped the washcloth tighter. No, I'm just busy. Nathan smiled faintly, his expression disbelieving. You've never been so busy, you didn't have time for a cup of coffee. I didn't know how to respond. He was right. I took a deep breath. Nathan, about yesterday. No need to explain, he interrupted. I understand. I looked at him, confused. Understand what? He folded his arms, leaning against the counter. You're scared. I blinked, unsure how to respond. Scared? Nathan nodded. Not afraid it happened, but afraid you wanted it to happen. I felt my chest tighten. I couldn't deny it, even if I wanted to. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the ticking of the clock. I shook my head, trying to push away the pull I felt. Nathan, we can't do this. He smiled, but there was nothing innocent in his eyes. You say we can't, but you never said you didn't want to. I froze. He stepped closer, and I should have backed away, but I didn't. Nathan, I whispered. His fingers brushed my arm, sending a shiver through me. You can push me away now, he said, his voice low, almost daring. Just say the word and I'll stop. I should have pushed him away, but I didn't. I let him come closer, knowing there was no turning back. We had crossed a line, and soon Ben would find out.